I don't know why I've decided to record today. It's been 5 minutes for me, but probably like 5 days for you. Anyway, hello. My name is Gail, and this is part 2 of a 2-part tell-all of the expectations for and the reality of the wealthy, and how that differs from the motion pictures painted by movies. You should probably check out the first part, if not already, because this will sound like a right rant otherwise. Yeah, I'm not joking here. There will be discussion of murder, drugs, the attraction to and mistreatment of children, especially sexually, unfortunately, and incestuous activity. In other news, I just got monetized. I'm not going to try to maximize the revenue I see from ads, just because I do not hate myself that much. Contrary to popular belief, I do occasionally try to avoid embarrassing myself, but it is nice to see that accruing in the background, I guess. I say this because I have no idea how much I can get away with before I get demonetized. So for fun, I will be testing those limits, and I'm sure you can imagine how the video would get demonetized given the wealthy, as you already know, are above the law, but I know that many people are not aware of the ways in which they are. For example, highly recognizable celebrities, as you can imagine, have more than a few unstable yet adept fans who would go to great lengths to meet their idol. For example, a client of my mate who is a highly recognizable celebrity and whom I will not name has had security forces who have made intrusive fans disappear. And by that, it's exactly what it sounds like. Granted, these fans? I keep forgetting that fans somehow snuck into his house or onto his property, but it was swept under the rug nevertheless, because they did not want that controversy. Since learning of that occasion, I have learned that it is much more common than you would think. This is what happens with men. I cannot imagine what women. They can and do make people disappear with relative ease, both deservedly and undeservedly. Let's just say that most, if not all, celebrities on par with Beyoncé, for example, and I'm using her because I've never actually met her, have had or even seen that get done. Not even the royal family of Great Britain, the wealthiest of them all, wink wink, is innocent. Those who choose not to make themselves public have to do the same thing, but for various other reasons a lot of the time. Another thing that people, especially ones like me who are invariably sober, do not realize is how easy it is to access drugs. So they do. I would say, and by I mean my mate and I, based on what we've seen in our careers, we would say that around 90% of celebrities, politicians, CEOs, heirs, and so on, at the very least, use performance-enhancing drugs. Not necessarily those for muscle gain, although many do, but excitatory, stimulating drugs that can help them to keep off the weight and work inhumanely long and hard. And then sometimes they do not even do the working hard bit. There's just a lot of illicit drug consumption up there. Yeah, people like Elon Musk are on drugs like ketamine. Sorry, but it's not like it was a secret anyway, Elon. He is definitely not watching these, at least not anymore. But anyway, when contemplating just how people in these positions of power and influence came to the conclusions they have, remember that they are very well medicated, a lot of the time at least, and that does affect the decisions they make. Drugs are nice to use along with some cognitive dissonance, so you never have to feel bad about tax evasion, assuming we are talking about the non-sociopathic ones. It is only drug abuse after you wake up in hospital if you are rich. Otherwise, if you are poor, then taking drugs is always drug abuse. Lastly, and this is going to get progressively more serious, mind you, when you have money and few limits which cannot be overcome with the right connections or maybe a flight somewhere, you get more time to realize certain parts of yourself that might have remained dormant if you had never found yourself with money and in a space with like-minded individuals, and with time, I guess. You know how Hollywood has, for the last century or so, maintained an air of acceptance of LGBT plus people and people of color, at least more so than the general population? Well, the same is true of just about every wealthier circle. There are so many more practicing gay and bisexual people in those circles than the general population would be willing to acknowledge and accept themselves. The only piece of media I have seen represent well the loaded is The Fall of the House Usher. hall of the House Usher, where numerous family members' sexualities are pretty fluid, but I would argue that it did not actually go far enough. Although I will say that there is still a ton of doubt and self-loathing with these kinds of people, especially if they are religious. They, like regular people, can struggle to come to terms with or even identify their sexuality. So while sexual orientation itself is not something that you can change or choose after the fact, your emotional responses to aspects of it, including shame and or disgust, can be shaped through conditioning, especially in childhood. Your body may desire freely, but your mind can be trained to reject even what it instinctively wants. Not because it's unnatural, but because we've been taught that it is. This will come up again. By the way, I consider myself to be asexual as a direct result of childhood abuse, but let's not get ahead of ourselves. That topic will come up in a few minutes as well. Did I mention that I was adopted? Yeah, I am Native American, but was not raised in that culture, of course. Yep, asexual and adopted. Wait, did I just hear one of you say that explains a lot? Who said that? I'm aware of the existence of cognitive distortions, but there is really just no other way to put it. When you hack someone... No, not to death. When you hack their devices, you get to see who they really are. Why? I have not hacked anyone in my life. Do I look like a hacker to you? Don't answer that. I am just in a relationship with a hacker I met online who has hacked people in front of me without me realizing it. Yes, I know that my words can and will be used against me. Point is that I have seen a lot of people get hacked. Doesn't matter how. So I have been privy to things that tend not to be spoken about or shown. In other words, a lot of you are lying to yourselves. Just come out of the closet for a second to subscribe and like the video already. I know you really want to, and you can go back inside afterwards. I never mentioned it, but being in a relationship with a very talented coder who just so happens to hack here and there without my knowledge is how I know who I know and what I know. It'd be nice to be able to prove it, but you can imagine these are the types of things you don't want to prove. If the wealthy are any indication of what is true for the rest of us, then the majority of people are in fact bisexual. However, it goes without saying that many people suppress it or obscure that side of themselves from the public. Sexuality is a spectrum, so most people will have their preferences, but there is in most some sexual compatibility with the same sex, even in light of one's first choice or preferred sex. I don't know, just deal with it. I don't care if your lifestyle perfectly aligns with your gender's customs or not. Still, it is different for these people, and it doesn't really come across in any of the movies or TV series you see about the rich, at least not to any realistic degree. The higher your class status, the more resources you have, the easier it is to find acceptance. You'd be unsurprised to learn that the majority of celebrity couples either cheat on one another or secretly have open relationships. The aforementioned male celebrity, for example, is married to a woman only for the purpose of keeping up appearances, and then sometimes when it comes out that someone cheats, they are not even cheating but just wish not to open up about their open relationship. But we all know this, right? Unfortunately, this also means that pedophiles, ephebophiles, hebephiles, and those with incest fetishes are not only able to fully realize their sexualities, or really in most cases depravities, but they are also able to practice them without too much risk. That famous male singer I mentioned before, did I mention he's a singer? I don't know. But he was the subject of much abuse in the industry as a child because he started his career between the ages of like 11 and 13, I think. He, like many, has struggled with drug addiction because he has had access since he was a child. Kind of like Drew Barrymore, come to think of it. But unlike Drew, as far as I know, he was exploited sexually by men older than he, sometimes much, much older, like actually 6 times older. I'll just call all of that pedophilia and incest, even though there are technically terms for when they are tweens and teens. The point is that the rates at which these things transpire are startling, and again, if they are any indication of what is true for the rest of us, then the implications are majorly depressing. My mate and I have had a run-in with an organization which specializes in the trafficking of kids, which... Well, at least the weather is beginning to match the tone of the conversation. As you can probably see, I do not even want to think about how difficult it is going to be to get a constant color grade out of this. But yeah, my mate and I have had a run-in with an organization which specializes in the trafficking of kids, which I actually alluded to in one of the videos I made last year, June, maybe July. I wasn't joking. There is a reason why I gave up on making videos for a year from, I think, July 2023 to June 2024. I said, and I quote, "Who would have thought literally being stalked by a bunch of horny teenagers on drugs and pedophilic adults who constantly give your mate death threats and murder attempts tends to put a damper on things, especially since I am a troglodyte who seldom left the house." Yeah, that really sucked. But I'll tell that story another day, and with people's real names, because I don't care. Yeah, they were taking teens they found in disenfranchised areas in the nearby city of Durban, supplying them with drugs, and then having them engage in activities with one another and, of course, grown adults working within the organization, some of whom were groomed themselves as kids, used to be the product, for lack of a better term. They would engage in activities in and around the house where my partner and I lived. We're actually going to be moving back there in a few weeks. And this is me back in town. So that is just slightly stressful. I know that I said I would not tell the story now, but I will just add that this was occurring at other properties in the estate. It was a private estate. It's an affluent area, so many houses were just too big to secure, and then they would only really target the largest houses because I guess they assumed people in them were wealthy enough to extort. There were some arrests, as one of the sexcapades was caught on security camera. Corrupted security guards were fired, but there were many families involved, and yes, there were entire families involved who were not caught, but the backyard and in-house exhibition has ended. At the very least. Last I checked, these families have retreated into the privacy of their homes. Sorry, you cannot say something like that and then not expatiate some, you know? I think that I will just stick to movies for now. The point of all of this is not to depress you, but to reinforce, to remind you that the wealthy are people, and they are like us whether we like it or not, but they are also often corrupted by their means, as you'd expect, and by their peers who tend to enable them, which is how they differ. It is tragic that some people are born into these environments and never learn what it is to be inferior or subordinate, or they may even never learn what it is to have a healthy relationship with physical boundaries with their parents. Their personal development, in more ways than one, is oftentimes stifled. Sometimes they are forced to grow up very quickly. The latter is true for me personally. Many do live life to the fullest, but with relatively few restrictions, they do not grow quite right, like a vine without one of those lattice fences or wires. The rich and powerful do not deserve admiration. Meritocracy is illegitimate. Not always, but too often the well-off have ineluctably done debased things in order to usurp their competition, because there is only so much room in those special lounges they love so much. Okay, I like them too. They're nice, but, you know, the experience is kind of ruined when the staff serving you are underpaid and unfulfilled. Easy access devalues. Stark inequality does not have to be inevitable, and these people are piteous. Let people earn your respect before you allow them to benefit from it. The difference between rich people in movies and rich people in real life is that in reality, the debauchery can be so much more morbid than you know, worse than that of which the middle class is capable with such limited resources, and the ones to which you are exposed, so celebrities, I guess, are the exception, not the rule. There are many more who choose to retreat into the privacy of their not-so-humble abodes with their children and drugs and covert operations because having fewer eyes on you lowers the likelihood of exposure.